So Jaguar and Aston Martin are in trouble. Two of the most iconic car brands of all time are a shadow of their former selves. Aston Martin is losing £1,000,000 a day, and Jaguar, the less we talk about it right now, the better. That said, it's rather frustrating to all of us fans of the brand. It's rather obvious what needs to be done to fix both. And for me personally, as a petrolhead, and of course, as a brand professional, as a branding expert, as a former head of marketing of a very, very large business unit for a very, very iconic brand, I think it's my responsibility to say what needs to be done. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Car. I'm Utkarsh, coming to you from Singapore. Thank you for the great response on my videos breaking down the Jaguar marketing campaign from a first principle standpoint, as well as my video on why BMW's ultimate driving machine is so iconic. Let's talk about Jaguar and Aston Martin in a structured fashion. I'm going to do three things. First, let's talk about, is there a future in Jaguar and Aston Martin? Do we think that there is a reason for them to exist for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? The answer is yes, but we'll talk about why. And then we'll talk about what is required for them to thrive and not just be a shadow of their former selves. First, let's talk about, is there really a need for a Jaguar and Aston Martin? The naysayers, and not just naysayers, but a lot of people, very well-informed people will tell you, rightfully so, that younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, whatever comes after Gen Z, they aren't that interested in some of the things that older generations, Gen X, boomers, were interested in. They aren't that interested in cars. They aren't that interested in drinking. Drinking is actually very, very true, because I have a ex-colleague who's now very high up in Heineken, and he reiterates what this finding. But to our point, they aren't that interested in cars, so what's the point? If we look at it that way, then the conclusion would be that the car is destined to become a high-end appliance, a glorified electric toaster or a glorified dishwasher. And so there should be no reason for any sort of luxury or high-end version of cars to exist, right? Because, a car is just an appliance, right? You don't have super high-end, super luxury dishwashers. But that isn't true. It isn't borne out by the data, because what is happening is it's not that all luxury car brands are struggling. In fact, some of the luxury car brands, and I'm using luxury in a broad term, not just luxury in terms of ride quality, but luxury in terms of pricing. So that includes stuff like Porsche and Ferrari, though we think of them as sports cars, not luxury cars. But the point is that high-end cars, some of them have been doing extremely well for the last 10, 15, 20 years, driven by a lot of people from the younger generation, a lot of new wealth. I mean, we all know what's happened with Porsches, what happens to certain iconic models of Porsches on the used market. We've seen what Ferrari's model has become, where you have to buy a lot of Ferraris to get access to the limited edition. So to compare the car, or to think that the car's future is that of an appliance, is not borne out by the data, and is really not understanding human beings very well. I've talked about this in my BMW video. The car is not just a means of transportation. It is ultimately a form of freedom. See my BMW video to understand more about this. So it would be very, very safe to say that as long as people are allowed to drive, and maybe even after that, the car will remain a very, very personal thing, and there will be a demand for a luxury or a high-end version of a personal thing. So with that in mind, what do Jaguar and Aston Martin need to do? The fixes are very simple, and what I'm saying will not come as a surprise to all of you, because I'm guessing if you're watching this, you are at least tangentially interested in these brands. It's a product fix, and it's a marketing fix, not the kind that Jaguar did, but leverage something that Jaguar and Aston Martin can do. And I'm going to talk about them separately. They're not the same. They're very different. But they have an advantage that they can leverage in marketing that they simply have not. Let's talk about fixing the product. If you look at it, the biggest issue with both Jaguar and Aston Martin hasn't been the marketing. It has been the product. Long-term reliability, a very, very dodgy part sharing, like when Aston Martin used to have Ford switchgear, right? And especially of late, there's also been an issue in terms of product positioning, because Aston Martin has one of the most confused product naming strategies that I have ever come across. I have no clue which one is what. I don't know the difference. Sometimes you have Vantage, sometimes you Vanquish, some V8, V12. Honestly, I'm a petrol head, but I get the hell confused. Two things that they need to do. Number one, they need to simply be a point of parity to the Germans, to the Bentleys, to the Rolls Royce. I know I'm calling them Germans, but they are owned by the German companies, to the BMWs, higher end BMWs, to the higher end Mercedes. They need to be a point of parity in terms of performance and product. What that means is that the quality needs to be similar, the reliability needs to be similar, and the fundamental specs need to be similar. There are many, many ways to solve this problem. Right? One reason that Aston Martin has always struggled is Aston Martin has always been a small company, so you simply don't have the scale of a Volkswagen that can then give Bentley everything it requires. Or you don't have the scale of BMW Group to give Rolls-Royce whatever it requires. There are solutions. You can do part sharing and potentially eat a little bit into your profit structure. But if Toyota can take the BMW B58 engine and the Supra, I mean, Toyota and BMW have very different brand equities. You can take whatever you need to take from whoever you need to take. So fix the product. Make sure it is at least as reliable and has a similar spec on paper to the Germans. And then you need to give it an X factor. You know, one of the things that makes such a big difference to a product, and I've realized this ever since I became an Alpina owner, is the ultimate tuning of the chassis. Right? And one thing I've realized is that even though I had a 335, F30 335, I had the Alpina B3, which is based on the 335i, and I drove, of course, F80 M3 extensively. The sheer sophistication of the Alpina, I mean, even people who have no clue about cars, they sit in that car, it's a very normal looking car. But then they're like, and especially they do a back-to-back with what's supposed to be a more comfortable car, and they look at the car, they're like, how the hell is this thing so comfortable? Right? It's shocking. So what I'm trying to say is there are experts out there, Alpina, what's happening, Alpina is also a little bit sad that they are kind of now a part of BMW. They won't be making that many new products anymore, mostly heritage. Maybe hire a couple of Alpina engineers, chassis engineers, whether you're Jaguar or Aston Martin. Great chassis is a big part of your heritage, a great part of your equity, great part of what your product promise needs to be. It's just the salaries of maybe a couple of experts. In the big scheme of things, when you're losing $1 million a day, I mean, that's such an easy fix. So fix the product. Both Aston Martin and Jaguar are sporty products at the end of the day. Both of them have great racing heritage. More on that in a bit. Fix it. Or as an extreme option, just if you're talking electrics, just buy the powertrains from the Chinese companies. It's okay. Right? I mean, they are building to a very particular price point that is way cheaper than what an Aston Martin or a Jaguar goes for. So you can potentially buy it almost at cost from there, or rather giving them a good profit, but at least you fix your powertrain, because the Chinese companies are ahead when it comes to the powertrain. So what I'm saying is, to the end consumer, what matters is the product they see. It doesn't matter where the parts come from. They want something that performs as well, rides as well, it performs to the brief of what a Jaguar or an Aston Martin needs to be. So fix the product. It's not an easy fix. In management presentations, it's very easy to sometimes, blame things that are easier to fix. Blame marketing because it's much easier to fix marketing, because it's just, it's what it is, versus doing a full product overhaul. But I think that Jaguar and Aston Martin have to just face up to reality, fix the things that are not fixed from a product standpoint, and that will set them off. Now, Jaguar is, of course, going to be all electric now. Okay, sure. I think it's a poor move. I think it's kind of an overreaction but to be fair, the governments did give a kind of an overreaction to by when they would phase out petrol cars. But okay, see what you can do now. I'm not going to give specifics of which powertrain, which whatever to use. That's for the experts, but let's just fix that. Now we get into the interesting area between marketing and product. Because what happens is product choice or product strategy has to be informed a little bit by marketing. And that's where Aston Martin in particular really needs to get their, pardon my French, shit together. Jaguar, for all the terrible marketing campaign that they just did, the product strategy is very clear. They have what they have, right? They have the the XE, which is the size of 3 Series, XF, size of the 5 Series, XJ, size of the 7 Series, SUV, couple of larger SUV, smaller SUV. They have a very solid, very clarified product lineup, which they're planning to abandon now apparently because they want to go all electric, which is so silly. I mean, every time I think about it, the Jaguar, all the moves made by Jaguar just irritate me. So I want to stay further irritated. But Jaguar's current product, internal combustion engine product lineup is pretty great. Even if they plan to go all electric, please reapply some of that. Now let's look at Aston Martin. I don't know what's going on. So if I open the Aston Martin website, you have the DB12, you have the Vantage. DB12 is a coupe. Vantage is also a coupe. Power is 680 for the DB12, 665 for the Vantage. Then you have the Vanquish, which is 835. Why is that a Vanquish mode? DBX is at least an SUV, so I understand what's going on. And of course, you have the Premier, the flagship model, which is the Valhalla. Great, but okay, I don't know. Why do I need a DB12 of Vantage? I mean, I'm confused. I know the Aston Martin purists are going to come after me. And I apologize that I am not the most involved person in Aston Martin, but I am just a normal consumer, right? You cannot only appeal to the people who know the ins and out of your brands. You have to appeal to a broader. I am a petrolhead. I would very much like to have an Aston Martin if I didn't live in Singapore, because Aston Martin's $1 million here. But if I lived in the UK or the US, I would very much be in the market for an Aston Martin. I don't know what to go for. I don't know what the difference is. Get your product strategy sorted. Look at how well Porsche do it, right? Porsche have a 911. That model has stayed what it has, since the beginning of time. That's one of the big reasons for Porsche's recent cult-like success. I will talk about Porsche at a different point in time. You have the 911, which is 911. You have a smaller mid-engine sports car, which is the Cayman, and of course the convertible of that. And then you have, of course, the SUV, the small SUV, Macan, the big SUV Cayenne. And then you have the electric Taycan. It's super easy to understand. It's super easy. I just explained it without looking it up. Ask me to explain Aston Martin's product lineup to anyone. I have no clue. And I can tell you, I love Aston Martin a lot more than I love Porsche as a brand. So what does that tell you? Okay, let's talk about marketing fix. Again, let's get into one of the things that is a big misconception. There is this cliche that younger people these days, they don't care about these old iconic brands. They don't care about things that are timeless. They just want the latest social media fad, whatever went viral on TikTok and all of that. That kind of thinking is extremely stupid and in lack of touch. The thing is, the problem with today's day and age is everything is disposable, because something comes up, something goes down, ideas are disposable, video is disposable, content is disposable. You watch something, then move on to the next one. What is missing is something that is long-lasting, something that is timeless, something that has pervaded. That is what Aston Martin and Jaguar are. These are historic brands. And historic brands' legacy is something newer brands would die for. I mean, the Chinese brands, BYD and whatever their premium version is, or Xiaomi or everyone, they're trying their best to build some sort of legacy. They even built that super fast sports car that then had a problem on the racetrack. They can't do it. You can't buy a 70 years, 80 years of history. That's impossible. You can't buy the feeling that people have had over the years. If I have thought about Jaguar since I understood what cars were. If I talk to my parents' generation, even though we are from India, we know what Jaguar is. We know what Aston Martin is. The James Bond movies have done what they have done for Aston Martin. That's the impact of time cannot be bought. You say time is money, which is true, but you cannot buy 80 years of history unless you buy the brand. Which is why what Jaguar did with just completely erasing everything and doing this copy nothing is just, it is malpractice as a marketing person. Sorry, I keep going back to this Jaguar thing, but when you have, what a brand, Grace. Okay, let's just say nobody here wants build your dreams, right? Build BYD. They want grace, space, and pace. You cannot compare the two, right? It's just shocking. So what I'm trying to say is, look at what brands have been doing with legacy. Look at what the watchmakers have been doing with legacy. Look at Patek Philippe. A new Chinese watch company cannot come and suddenly try and do what the old Swiss watches can do, right? You just have that legacy. So Jaguar, Aston Martin, you have that. Now you need to bring it to life in an interesting way for the younger generation. And also the number of people in the younger generation is a little bit, overblown. Even when I worked in my previous company and my previous very, very iconic big brand, the younger generation, this age 25 to 30 or 25 to 35 or 21 to 35 just was held, we kind of always gave them a little bit too much importance. Now, for razors, it's fine because they can still buy razors. But for premium luxury cars, you have to look at the people in the 30s and the 40s. These are people who are old enough to have had enough money, to have made enough money to buy your cars. Yet you have a pretty good runway. They have another 40 years of potentially being your customer. So it's not very short-term thinking. Like if you were focusing on only people who are over 70 years old, that would be very short-term, right? So please understand that. And these people thirst for legacy because a lot of these folks, speaking again from personal experience, we've seen these iconic brands and we've seen all of these new brands, and new brands come and go. You want something that has that sort of prestige. So what you need to do from a marketing standpoint is lean deep into the history, but bring it forward in a way that a younger generation or a more diverse audience, yes, I'm going to bring the diversity word here, but it's true. The world is a little bit more diverse today in terms of who would be buying a Jaguar or Aston Martin. They enjoy it. I really liked what Bentley did. Bentley recently did that video where they had Damon Hill and Ken Burns' daughter, I'm forgetting her name, my apologies, race a couple of Bentleys on a track. What a video. Now, I would love it anyway. I would typically show my wife a car video on a track. She wouldn't care. But because it was Ken Burns' daughter, a girl, and then driving the car really well, then she was very intrigued by it. So these are the sort of things. This is not trying to be, do any sort of virtue signaling or pander to show diversity for the sake of it. This was very cool. I mean, Ken Burns, the OG internet car sensation, is unfortunately now deceased. His daughter in the Bentley and then racing, it's such a good fit. Like it literally, I was so happy when I saw it. So that's a good example of Bentley is, of course, luxury, but it's also sporty. And just bringing it to life in a YouTube video with using slightly more different cast of characters than you normally would. That's a great example. So, in conclusion, Jaguar, Aston Martin, there is plenty of life work left in these companies, in these brands. They just need a product fix and they need to lean heavily into the legacy to differentiate themselves between all the new pretenders on the market. I don't know if they'll do this, but they really should. I'm hoping for the best. All right, that is all I had. I'll see you next time.